Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. NATO's top commander, General Alexis Skinkevich, has backed Chancellor Friedrich Merz's warning that Russian drones over Poland were no accident, calling them a serious threat to European security. In response, NATO is preparing new measures for Poland, and Germany doubles its Eurofighters. The Netherlands accelerates Patriot deployments, and France has decided to deploy 3 Rafale fighter jets to Poland as well. Now, for Warsaw, many are calling this the country's first real test. Joining us now to discuss what that means is Garvan Walsche, CEO of Article 7 Intelligence for Democrats. Good to have you back on TVP World. Good morning.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure.
Garvan, I want to start with a bit of a juxtaposition here. We've just heard very recently, going to the United States, Donald Trump has said that these Russian incursions could have been an accident. Much of a different policy in Europe. Also with Sikorski, the foreign minister of Poland, he was in Kiev today saying, well, that is not true, that is not the case. Tell us a bit how you interpret this hesitation since we've seen since Wednesday from the United States and what Europe's response has been to all this.
Well, it's quite clear they were not an accident, and they were not an accident for 2 reasons. First of all, the numbers of drones, there were about 18 or 19. Secondly, many of these didn't have explosive warheads. They were there to say, hey, we can come in here. They weren't there to cause significant explosive damage because they knew that would escalate things too far. This was Russia trying to put the NATO defenses under question, trying to test the Polish response and trying to test both the military and political response at a time when the United States is not playing its traditional role of being an ironclad guarantor of NATO security. Mm-hmm. We see that with Trump. We see him trying to buy into Russian propaganda about this, saying they were an accident. They clearly were not an accident. They were part of a deliberate provocation strategy, and this is a tactic that Russia has used continuously over decades. There's even a show in Britain from about 30 years ago called Yes, Prime Minister, where there's an elaborate joke based on Russia crossing borders and, as they say it, accidentally on purpose. This was a case of accidentally on purpose kind of activity, and what it is Russia trying to say, well, we can do something, but if you react to it, we'll treat this as an overreaction. Mm-hmm.
And let's talk also about, there were several European countries that are involved in all this on Wednesday, the readiness, the cohesion. Tell us how you interpret it. How did NATO react collectively? We're saying that the Prime Minister and the Polish government have passed this first test. How do you see it all?
Well, we're seeing a situation where Europe has responded very strongly. The United States has not responded strongly. I think this shows where Poland's true friends are under the Trump administration, and we're seeing France sending fighter jets, European leaders being very concerned, Ursula von der Leyen herself saying Europe is in a fight. And the important thing here is that we need to respond to this Russian thing robustly, but not necessarily symmetrically. We need to find out what Russian weaknesses are and respond in that way. I would like to see the European countries seizing the Russian assets that are currently sequestered mostly here in Belgium. I would like to see more support for Ukrainian long-range strike capability. This is the kind of area where it's possible to harm Russian interests and force the Russian economy into a more difficult situation without having a direct confrontation with, in military terms, with the Russian Federation. Mm-hmm.
And let's also talk about, as you said, where you are in Belgium. With the European Commission, the European institutions playing also a key role in all this, maybe not as in assets that they can deploy, but resources and strategy that they can deploy also that other countries can be more ready. One of those things also floating around, I think, is the idea of this drone wall floated by Poland and the Baltic states. We're also talking about the European Sky Shield initiative. So tell us a bit more where you stand on this. Is this the backbone we're supposed to be building up, and how can Brussels and EU institutions help in all this?
The biggest thing that Brussels can do is to provide money. There's this very important initiative called the SAFE initiative that allows countries to borrow it cheaply to fund defense expenditure. Something like 40 billion euros have been allocated to Poland under this scheme. There is Germany itself providing huge amounts of money for rearmament now, including money going directly to the Ukrainian industry. There's what's called the Danish model, where wealthy European countries supply money to Ukrainian arms factories directly. It's one of the most cost-effective ways of inflicting damage on Russian forces. And what the EU really needs to do is learn to act more quickly. There was an initiative called ASAP that took about 2 years to get going to buy artillery. There's the Sky Shield initiative that has gone slowly because of Franco-German disagreement over what kind of parts of this system, which would build a layered air defense for the European continent, should be bought and where. The French have a very capable missile system called the SAMP-T. It needs scale, but it's as good as Patriot, at least according to Ukrainian officials I've spoken to. It's the Germans didn't want to order it as part of their proposal for the Sky Shield initiative, so it's not part of it. Conversely, the French were very reluctant to support the ASAP artillery initiative because the artillery ammunition wasn't necessarily going to be French. Really, it's a time where European countries have to get together. The threat that Russia poses is common to all of us, and we have to put aside these national rivalries and start using the fact that we have a very powerful industrial base. Europe actually makes more steel than the United States does. We have very advanced defense manufacturing. We have started to see significant scaling up of that capability. There was a very interesting investigation by the Financial Times showing a huge expansion of factories to produce weapons. Now we just need to move this more quickly, and we need to build up that scale, and with that scale we can defend our own skies and we can continue to defend Ukraine as well. But we need to do this in a way that is coordinated and puts national rivalries aside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the tricky question, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned on some of those things, if we're looking at procurement, if we're looking at some of these, you said the Franco-German relationship, but also that fragmentation. Now, with this newest incursion, do you think at any point some of those things will become a little bit more easier to overcome? Do you sense that this will change that political will, or are we just going to be having this debate for another few months and years?
Yeah, I think the response to this initiative is not so much a question of capability. 19 drones are obviously within Europe's capability to deal with. It is a question of political will. It's a question of understanding that even if we don't think we're at war with Russia, Russia thinks it's at war with us. And that means we need to work out how to respond across the entire front from the Baltic to the Black Sea. This is something that goes as far as Svalbard in the North Atlantic, which is a North Arctic Ocean, which is a Norwegian island chain in the Arctic Ocean, all the way down to Varna and Burgas on the Black Sea, the coast of Bulgaria. Russia sees this as a single front against the European peninsula of the Eurasian landmass, and they're trying to probe it at all possible points, and we have to be resolute across that whole front. But it also means we have the ability to pose strategic dilemmas to Russia. Russia's biggest shortage actually is air defense now. Ukraine is starting to attack their oil industry pretty effectively. And if Russia needs to think about whether it should put its air defense in Ukraine, whether it needs to protect St. Petersburg and Moscow, which are of course very, very near the Finnish border, then it will have to divide its air assets, and it will be harder for it to be able to defend against those potential threats. We can also look at things like, can we do more to protect the Ukrainian skies? This is something also called the Sky Shield Initiative, a different one, but it's one where European forces and European aircraft could be used to help protect Ukrainian airspace, allow Ukraine to concentrate its land-based air defense in eastern Ukraine. We need to start talking openly about perhaps supporting the Ukrainian air capability more directly. Perhaps more aircraft can be transferred to Ukraine. Perhaps there are ways for other support to be given to the Ukrainian Air Force, because one of the reasons the front has been stalling over the past 2 or 3 years is that Ukraine doesn't have significant air capability, and it's had to mount a ground campaign, and this has been rather difficult. That's why we're talking about things like the wall of drones. They're changing the way, at least in the summer months, ground combat takes place. So you need lots of small quadcopter type drones to organize your defense and offense in the ground theater. These are different from the kind of drones that attacked Poland on Wednesday night, Thursday morning. Those are large drones. Those are the Shaheds, the Iranian-style ones, that are really more advanced versions of a very, very primitive cruise missile rather than a drone.
Okay. I want to move for a moment from the kinetic to the diplomatic here. The United Nations Security Council, at the request of Poland, is set to meet. I mean, with this forum, Russia has veto power. What kind of value and what significance can we have from that meeting?
This is not just about practical, immediate legal instruments. It's also about the narratives, and it's very important that we make the argument that shows that Poland was attacked here, that Poland is entitled to protect itself, that the West and Europe is entitled to defend itself from this Russian aggression. And the UN is the forum where we can talk to a global audience and explain that Russia is continuing in its plan to put European free countries under pressure. Russia is trying to, it has invaded Ukraine, it has done cyber attacks on Estonia, it has had a series of different incursions into European sovereignty over the last 15 or 20 years, and this pattern is continuing, and we need to show to the world that Russia is a rogue state, isn't willing to abide by norms of international law, even the most basic ones that say that frontiers should not be revised by force, which is the cornerstone of international peace and security. And we need to make that clear to countries in the world that may not share our European history, may not understand what is going on our continent. We're talking about countries like Brazil or South Africa or Argentina, or Thailand or Vietnam, countries with a very different history to ours, and they need to understand that too, because this is a part of a global conflict and not just a border skirmish in Northeast Europe.
Mm-hmm. I also want to ask you, looking at these drone incursions, this is the first time, as a reminder of viewers on Wednesday, that they were actually shot down over NATO territory, but we've had these kind of intrusions before. How dangerous is it that this becomes a new normal? Are we going to see more of this? What should ultimately be Europe's response? Now this is very present, we're talking about this here, but is this a kind of gray zone new normal we're heading into?
It could be if we don't respond forcefully and make it clear to Russia that they will suffer consequence for this. That is why I think the most urgent thing we could do is to seize those assets, to make it clear that we don't. And this shows that we're no longer trying to just use the money from the assets, but we should actually take them and give them to Ukraine and allow Ukraine to use them to build up its long-range capability. This would be a very important signal of intent from European powers, and this would show Russia that this kind of escalation is not going to be tolerated.
All right, so no toleration there on the kinetic front, diplomatic and economic front, to deter Russia and all this. Look, we'll close it there. Thank you so much for all that. Really a pleasure. Garvan Walsche, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us. That was World Talks, but there's much more coming up right here on TVP World, so don't go away.